all started when I was in this Minecraft world. I knew that this world was definitely a bit interesting considering the fact that it was so dark and strange. It had a very gloomy aura to it. I wasn't exactly sure what caused the aura, but I was definitely very determined to figure out exactly what was going on in this world. Now, I did notice that the village in itself had a very strange spawn location. You see, in Minecraft, there are many different villages that you can have, but in this version of Minecraft, the spruce versions of villages are usually spawning in with some weird characteristics. Now, this was something that I didn't expect, but of course, I knew eventually that I was going to find out something weird. So I decided to look up and around, and I noticed that the moon was shining quite decently. But you have to understand, it was night for quite some time. The thing that was truly strange was the fact that the time didn't change in this world. Although it seemed as if the sun was going down and the sun would come up, this never happened. Now, I didn't really know exactly what was wrong with this world, but what I wanted to figure out was exactly what was going on when it comes to this right here. You see, something I realized about this world was very terrifying. As I walked into the village, I noticed that as I looked up, there was a complete red moon. Now, we know that it's an actual moon and not some celestial object, because when we look over there, I could see that this has the same exact texture as the moon. Now, of course, you can see the moon going below the trees right there, but it will once again rise, as you shall see. So it has the distinctive pattern going across and down, and that is the same pattern that moon has right there. Now, it was definitely very confusing at first to see the differences in the moons. And like I said, it was very interesting because the moon had varied patterns. It didn't really act as one would think that it would act. It definitely acted in a very strange way. As you can see, usually the moon is going up or down, attaching itself to the natural daylight cycle in Minecraft. But this moon was definitely very, very different. As you can all see, this moon didn't do that at all. It was definitely very intriguing to see. But I do know that this definitely played a large part in exactly what we saw here. Now, I wasn't exactly sure what this was at first, because like I said at first, I did think it was a strange object. But then of course, I realized that this was a red moon. Now at first, I did think, what kind of red moon is this? But I then realized that this wasn't any kind of red moon. This was in fact a very strange, unique type of blood moon. Now you might be wondering what the blood moon is, but this is a very rare and special type of moon that only forms when bad things happen in a Minecraft world. Now, I'd only heard stories about this. I wasn't entirely sure if it was true, but seeing it firsthand definitely made me speculate whether or not this was going to be 100% true. What was even scarier was that the original moon was intact, but the blood moon definitely hovered over as if it was some kind of protector. And what was even scarier about the whole situation was that it was hovering over an entire village. So I didn't really know what to do. Besides, of course, look around and see if there were any clues as to what caused this blood moon. Then what I decided to do was go downstairs and see exactly what was going on. So I noticed that there was a very strange board nearby. I did look around the board just to make sure that there weren't any booby traps, because sometimes there are many traps in Minecraft worlds and you can completely fall for them. One trap I did notice was right here. It said that the strange moon has appeared over the village. We are not sure as to what has caused the moon to appear over our village. Some villagers are calling it the blood moon. It is very strange as it has made some villagers' eyes turn red and go quite insane. So this is why we need to be careful, as aggression is increasing. Now, of course, this story does put a shake in my boots because I was pretty scared to know exactly what was going on. I was truly scared because I didn't know exactly how far the blood moon would take it. I mean, were creatures going to be popping out of nowhere, and were villagers going to become super aggressive? This is definitely something that I was going to be quite scared of, but I didn't realize exactly just how bad I had it. So I decided to do some further digging and see if I could speak to some more villagers. So of course, as you guys can see, I then managed to walk myself into... I decided that since this... testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. So I decided that since this wasn't a prison, I needed to look around and see exactly what was going on. Because in Minecraft, there aren't really villager prisons. If this was going to be some kind of prison, it had to be something that was built by some kind of strange structure. So as I opened up the door, I noticed immediately that it was in fact a prison. Now, this shouldn't have been any surprise as the sign was on the outside, but this structure didn't make sense to me. What was even more confusing is that inside this prison, there were villagers that were trapped. The only problem was their eyes weren't really normal. Their eyes were completely red, and this was definitely very confusing. I wasn't sure exactly why as to this happened, but it was definitely very insane. As you can all see, the villagers at the time weren't even moving forward or backwards. They were just simply stagnant in their approach, which meant that they were doing something weird. Now, this is where I got more information. I decided to speak to the villager, and he said, hey, we need to talk. He said these are the blood villagers. As I spoke to him, I started to realize exactly what was going on with the blood moon. I realized that they somehow had become infected with something, and he wasn't sure what it was. He said it's quite scary actually. They looked at it for too long. So I'm guessing that based on the description by this guy, you can see that the blood moon definitely experienced some kind of working effect. I wasn't exactly sure how it works, but I was guessing that maybe those villagers looked up at the sky and the blood moon that they looked at seemingly gave them red eyes and somehow transformed their behavior. Now, I wasn't sold on the fact that these guys moved in a different way, so I decided it would be best if I could test this theory. But the only problem was I didn't really have enough iron to break this down. So I decided to see if I could find a blacksmith in the village, because that would be best for me to see if I could actually get my hands on some iron, and that way I would break open the prison, and then it would be good to see if they're actually aggressive or if they're actually just acting in a different manner. So I decided to walk around the village and look around as much as possible, but I didn't really see the blacksmith village as quickly as possible. So I decided just to get myself 2 wooden blocks, because that was going to be the quicker route, but it was definitely going to be interesting to see their behavior in what it was. So I decided to move up here and get myself this crafting table. Once I crafted the crafting table, I then managed to craft myself a pickaxe. The reason I chose a pickaxe is because I already had the majority of the other tools, but I decided not to break too many of the barriers, because I knew that if I broke too many of the barriers, then these villagers could very well escape. The moment I broke this open, I noticed that these villagers definitely were strange in behavior, as one of them did straight up attack me, but the other one didn't. So it was clear that maybe, just maybe, one of them was more infected than the other. But then again, the moment I started to come nearby, they both decided to attack me. It was definitely a very scary and very regrettable experience that I will never ever do again. It was definitely something that I hate, and I definitely will be getting revenge on these villagers if I live to see it out. So I decided that since there was a blood moon, and since these villagers acted in a way which was completely despicable and should never have happened, I decided that it would be nice if I could find out exactly what caused the blood moon. Now, I didn't want to stare too much at the blood moon, I just wanted answers, because I needed to know what exactly happened. So I had to see if I could find out any other village and see if there were any other villagers who were knowledgeable on the subjects of blood moons. So whilst walking around, I did manage to speak to a couple villagers, but many of the ones that I tried to speak to were simply traders that didn't have any vocal capacity. So I did actually manage to find one that was pretty interesting. This one was actually located pretty high up, and I wasn't even sure how I managed to get there, but with a few block places I actually managed to place something down, and it was definitely very interesting. So as you can all see, the moment I opened up this area, it was definitely very interesting because there were several signs that were there. Now, it does say the truth about the blood moon. The blood moon is an event which chooses a random village for 7 days, and during these 7 days, villagers will go crazy and angry. There will also be much more random mob spawning and being aggressive. Beware of the hostile mobs and blood moon villagers. Now, this was very scary because I knew that there were possibilities of mobs being spawned, but I didn't know just how dangerous it would be, considering I didn't really see any of the mobs. And something that was still concerning me was the fact that every time I still went outside, I checked the time and it was still nighttime. This meant that the blood moon was still in effect and we were plunged into eternal darkness for the rest of our eternity. When I also checked the chest that the villagers standed near, I didn't really see anything inside of it, which definitely worried me quite a bit because I at least thought that there was going to be some kind of items in there, and I at least thought that maybe they would have actually done something different this time. But I guess that was not what happened. So then I decided to talk to this villager, and he had some wise words for me. He then said, I've heard that we can reset the blood moon. If we create a beacon, I'm not sure how it's done. So I'm guessing that what the plan was to create some kind of beacon which goes into the air and then potentially see if that beacon could somehow use the power of that beacon and destroy the... Now, the only problem I had was I needed to see if I could find out a place that had a chest with that diamonds, or if I could find a place that had some kind of items in it. Now, I wasn't exactly sure exactly what I was going to do, but I just knew that I had to explore every single place as soon as possible. So I decided to make sure that if I was going to do this, I did it as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I grabbed myself some dirt and hopped in the church to see if there were any areas that were nearby. Now I did manage to see that the church was definitely going to be a very good candidate for where I placed the beacon, but I still needed to find the resources. So I decided to continue looking around to see if I could find those resources intact. So I decided to continue looking around and continue opening every single chest if possible. That's when I managed to come across this villager right here. It was definitely very strange because I decided to peek in the window before I actually went inside. And it was luckily that I did that because from the moment I looked inside the window, I was very concerned. I saw what appeared to be a villager that was covered in blood, but it was definitely quite strange because he didn't seem to have come out of any fight or be limping or laying down. So I wondered what on earth was actually going on and why hadn't this villager contacted me at all. So I decided to talk to him and he said, "Hello, please build that beacon quickly. We need it. The sky is falling." So I'm guessing that this villager had a very different opinion on what was right from what was wrong. And I decided that I would definitely see if I could build this beacon for him. So I decided to open up the chest and use these diamonds to build this beacon. And I wasn't sure if this signal was going to rectify the damage that the beacon had already caused, but I was definitely going to make sure that if I built this beacon, it was definitely going to be one that I could successfully see. So I decided to empty out this area to see if that it was going to be viable, and sure enough, the beacon area was viable. The only problem was I didn't remember exactly how to create a beacon. I just knew that it was possible with a bunch of diamonds. So I decided to create the base of the beacon with around a lot of diamonds, considering that I did need these if I was going to fight the hostile mobs, but I didn't really see any nearby, so I wasn't too worried about it. Eventually, I then managed to get the final layer of the beacon done, and I managed to place the beacon on top. But the only problem was the beacon didn't go straight to the sky immediately. It did go, but it did miss. I wasn't sure whether or not this was going to work, so I decided to leave it for quite some time. I was also surprised at the fact that we completely missed our target, but at the same time I wasn't too surprised because we only had one beacon placed. Now I knew the moon was going to be potentially destroyed, I decided to continue looking around for more answers. One thing that I did come across, funnily enough, was a strange looking trap door that I found when I was looking for villages. This one was definitely very strange because it was made out of wood and not of iron, meaning that the access was free and open. I decided to go down there and I noticed that the ladder itself was made out of strange materials, meaning that whoever had built this was using some kind of strange type of modification for Minecraft. Upon entering the secret basement, I managed to find a scientist working on what seemed to be some kind of astral projection. I wasn't exactly sure how on earth this worked, so I decided to question him on his whiteboard. When I questioned him, he then said, "I figured out how to beat this thing. It's not done by a beacon, it's done by something like that." And as you guys can all see, he then said, "Take the rocket and do it for me." So I decided to take the rocket launcher, and then I decided to get the rockets that were high velocity. I then decided to get out of here while I still could, and decided to make sure I could test this out. Now, of course, it was raining and I didn't know if that would affect the velocity of the rockets or not. At the same time, I knew that I was going to need to use this rocket on something. So these rockets were high velocity and I wasn't exactly sure how that worked, but I did put them in my inventory and I decided to shoot one of these rockets. It was definitely very quick and exploded a decent amount of the area. Now, I didn't know if shooting this up would destroy the blood moon immediately or it would crater down and kill me. So I decided to just shoot it up at the sky. But funnily enough, it didn't actually work. A high velocity rocket, so I decided to make sure that I used this rocket to the best of my ability, aimed it up, and then I fired. Now, the rocket was definitely kind of scary because it didn't go all the way to the top. In fact, it kind of fizzled out, and I knew that if I was going to destroy the blood moon, I was going to need a lot more height. I wasn't exactly sure how much more height I would need, but I just knew that potentially, because of the rain and because of the fact that the moon was so tall, I would definitely need a lot more height to get this thing gone. So I needed to make sure I got myself all of this dirt, and then I decided to fire off the rocket. It was definitely very strange at first because looking at all of the coming down, I wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but I decided to make sure that I kept going up and up and up, and then I decided to break through the trees. Now I decided to get this up and up and up, and once I was in one of the tallest trees, I reloaded the rocket again, and I decided to hit fire. This time, it was definitely very, very interesting because the rocket, once again, seemingly somehow managed to miss. Then I decided to wait for the rain to stop. Then I decided to use my rocket once again to fire off again. Now, I was actually pretty skeptical because I didn't think that this would work. And what I decided to do this time was fire off a bunch of different rockets and hit it from an angle because maybe, just maybe, my initial way of firing rockets wasn't actually working. So I got myself an angle and then I decided to fire off as many rockets as possible because I knew that eventually one of them would hit and eventually this blood moon would be somehow destroyed. I wasn't exactly sure when or where, but I just knew that eventually if I kept trying, the blood moon would get destroyed. Now, as high as I got, imagine my surprise when the blood moon still wasn't destroyed. I knew that there was still work to be done, but I knew that I only had a couple more rockets left, and the fact that if I didn't get this done soon, I would definitely be in a very dire state. So I decided to fire a few more rockets, and then eventually, to my surprise, this was something that actually was disappeared. And then I knew that the village was saved. Luckily, but surely, it was returning to daytime, and I just knew I had to get out of here before things started to get even weirder.